guys.
Hello, Eli.
Bom dia.
Okie dokie.
Fantastic.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yes.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, first time that we have a car interview.
It had to happen eventually. It's not going to be an airplane interview. It's the next best thing I could do for you is a car.
Okay, so just for a brief introductions, as long some of the people who are joining, the people who are watching later, they don't know you much. So I would like to have a quick introduction about yourself. So I got some information from your website, some information from LinkedIn, some information from YouTube. So I got bits, parts and bits all over the place. So let's see if I get the correct introductions here. So you are an Australian expat. You are born from Russian Jewish parents who moved to
Australian
Australia.
expat who's back in Australia.
You are back in Australia, okay.
Yes, I am in Sydney now for the last 3 years.
Okay, but you were born in Russia or you are born in Australia?
Born in Russia. Born in Leningrad, in Russia.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, but then what's in Australia? You are a citizen already or just expat?
So no, I'll give you a very quick summary. My parents moved from the Soviet Union to Israel when I was 3 years old.
Okay.
And so my childhood was in Israel. We came to Australia when I was 10, and for 20 years I lived in Australia before the bug of innovation and high tech called me back to Israel. I spent 20 years there, and then 3 years ago my wife said we should come back so that our children will know their grandparents and spend time with their grandparents. We have 2 little girls, so 3 years ago we came back. We came back from Israel.
Oh, nice.
We are both citizens living back in our in Sydney. So it is very lovely here.
No, but one of the interesting stories that I was able to catch up here in YouTube is that when you joined the Israel army, you don't have a position there, so you became a DJ in the Israel Golan Army in 2002.
I was it was voluntary, very short few DJ performances just to entertain the troops. It was just a small contribution I could make.
That is nice. Because you wanted to do arts, isn't it? You want to study arts.
Look, I think everybody wants to study arts. Most people want to study arts. A lot of people want to, but they feel they don't have a choice. They don't want to be like Gauguin, the famous French painter, who his family was a banking financial family, and he at 43 remembered that he wanted to be an artist and left the family and left everybody and went to Tahiti. So, we don't have that luxury to go to Tahiti.
Me too, would like to be to Tahiti. So then the official presentation starts here. So you have degrees both in law and economics from UNSW in Sydney, Australia. You have an MBA in innovation and entrepreneurship from IDC, and it's not Israel, is it?
It's in Israel. It is in Israel. Yes.
And then you have more than 20 years of international experience in a variety of business, marketing, and innovation roles. And one of the most last longing that you have is MDocs. So that is MDocs. Who don't know, MDocs is a global telecommunications software leader. It's a huge company, more than 25,000 employees all around the world. And then within the last years, you are the co-founder and the senior innovation consultant at Northern Star Innovation. That is a boutique consultancy specialized in creation and management of innovations. Is that correct so far?
Yes, very good, very good. You sound like a Brazilian intelligence officer from the Brazilian intelligence community. You got profile perfect. My only thing I want to say, so innovation is a very large area, of course, and there are many different roles and specialization. My specialization is how to create innovation in large organizations. If it's corporate or NGO or not-for-profit, but medium to large organizations, how to create a culture, a systematic culture of innovation there.
Okay.
So that's my focus.
Perfect. And besides of your expertise in your consultants business, you are a professor, so you have several lectures and classes in MBAs overall. So one of them is Emeritus, where I have the pleasure to be your student. So it was a very interesting course, and it's open-minded that when you get all those inputs and tools and everything, you start thinking with another head, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a 9-month diploma combining two what I call tactical innovation courses, design thinking and SIT, breakthrough innovation, and a strategic course. And I think this is actually one of the areas that is not addressed by academia sufficiently. It's much easier to teach ideation and practice ideation once you understand it than to apply strategy to innovation. And so the course that we did based on the 3-box solution by Professor Vijay Govindrajan, who is the Harvard and Columbia head of strategic innovation, is really important to have that other side, to know what's happening after your idea is green-lighted by internal management, or you have round A, round B from VC investors, right? What do you do then? How do you make it? How do you implement? How do you avoid mistakes that large companies companies make?
And one of the things, I don't want to go further in our discussion, but one of the important things that you always mention in our course is that one of the regular mistakes that companies do when they are thinking on innovation is to think on the solution, not on the problem. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say it's just the companies. I would say it's a general mistake of people who want to innovate. They start off with an idea. They have a great idea, and they put all their energy into the idea. This happens across the line with people who want to innovate. With companies, there's organizations, there's different mistakes that are made. And in fact, in the strategic course, we look at specifically famous mistakes that companies make. Cisco is a great example. There's if you want to have a look at a great example of a company that kills internal startups through not managing internal jealousy between parent company and startup companies. Look at Cisco. Unfortunately, Intel is another very good example. But on a startup level, yes, many make the mistake of thinking that they have a great idea, whereas really the correct approach is to start with an understanding of the challenge, the market, the situation, seeing where there are pain points and unmet needs.
I see. So coming back to our topic here, so today our session's title is how can managing innovation help you strive and survive? So in order to start this discussion, I'd like to break into small topics. So first of all, talking about innovation. So innovation is completely different of creativity. But the other way around is true. So creativity is essential for innovating. So what's the creativity overall?
So very often people do seem to get confused between these two topics. They assume that just because something is creative, it's also innovative. In fact, in Japan, they have a whole culture of creative and useless ideas. So ideas that are creative as an exercise in creativity, but don't have any use as sandugo. We know that you have to have both of those elements. You have to have something that's creative and innovative. How do you move from creativity to innovation? The key two words here are implementation. So you must implement the idea that you have, otherwise it will always remain an idea on paper. And this is actually where most companies fail. They don't fail in coming up with good ideas. It's not, if you apply design thinking, if you apply SIT, if you apply best practice, you can get to good ideas, but implementation is the multiplier. And if you don't do implementation correctly, if you make common mistakes, such as judging your startup by the wrong matrix. I'll give you a very quick example. Cisco, through its startup program where it would take startups in and give them money and offer to buy them out, would base that on short-term financial revenue. So if very, very clearly, if a company didn't meet its quarterly revenues within the first 2 years, Cisco would stop investing in it, and it would be left. The startup will be left on its own, which is against all the rules that we have for how large companies should develop startups. They should treat them like babies. You don't expect your baby to be a teenager and have a grown-up responsibilities the same way you can't expect your startup to behave like a grown-up company and give you the ROI and the financial matrix that your own company currently gives you.
Okay, so talking about babies, I understand that creativity is not something that that we can develop over time. Is there any characteristics we develop that over the time, creativity, or we are born with that, or all the way around?
So the studies, especially studies of Professor John Land, who was involved in advising NASA in the late 60s on how to hire creative engineers. He did some very interesting tests. He's got a great TED talk. If you want to have a look, TEDx, on his work. According to his studies, according to other studies, he took 1,600 children at the ages of 3 to 5, and he tested them for high creativity. He found that 98% of children at those ages exhibited high creativity. So doing that test again on the same group over a number of years, by the time this group of children reached 18, the percentage that showed that high level of creativity had dropped down from 98% down to 2%. So you can see that, yes, it's something that we are all born with. Pretty much all of us are born with, but is lost, unfortunately, over time. But the good news is we can get it back. So there are techniques to get it back.
This is my next question. So we are born with creativity, but then somebody teaches us how to lose this creativity. So we start thinking inside one box, and we are struggle to that small box, and we cannot develop our creativity. But as per you just talked it, we are able to revert that.
I will tell you something quite controversial, Luis. So there are consultants, and there are innovation professionals who claim that what they do is they help employees gain creativity. I'm not sure this is true. I'm not sure it's actually necessary. To be completely honest with you, I don't know that I need my employees. I have to have them to be more creative as people. So does it matter? Of course, it would be nice. It would be great if they had creative habits like art and music and other expressive forms of creativity. This is one type of creativity, of course. But I think there's a strong argument to say that it doesn't really matter. You don't have to turn your employees into creative people. What you do need is for them to work in a creative way and to make creative results. So the focus is not on personality types. The focus is on skills and tools to help you make creative output. And there's a distinction. If I can get you, Louis, to be more creative in the ideas that you have and how you apply them and how you succeed, then to me it doesn't matter whether at night you write poetry before you go to sleep and whether you painting great works of art. To me, what matters, I know it sounds cold, but ultimately what matters is the result. Can you get innovative results, increase the innovative output of your workforce and of the way that you do business?
So for what I understand from your points, innovation in this case is a matter of culture. So if the organization doesn't have an innovation culture, the employees can be creative, but then they cannot deploy all the creativity that they have in innovation. You must have a culture.
That's a good question. So the philosophy used to be about 20 years ago, that in order to do innovation internally in large organizations, you need to find the creative people. You need to search for them. You need to find the few very creative people. You put them in a room, and they will be your creativity engine. This theory and this approach has been completely debunked and completely overturned and revolutionized. And the approach today is that everybody can contribute to innovation in a company. It doesn't matter what your position is. It doesn't matter whether or not you are believed to be creative or not. Now, so you will, of course, there will always be people in the company who are naturally creative and have tools intrinsically. Because they are creative, they apply tools that they have developed themselves over time, or their own creativity tools and abilities. They don't think about them as tools. They're just creative. But for the rest of us who are part of the 98% who have lost their creativity over time, we can gain those skills back through training and through workshops, through webinars, through tools. Now, will that make us more creative people? It's a philosophical question. I don't really think we need to go into this question. The more important question is, will this training allow the results to be better? Will this training allow the thinking process to be disruptive, to be questioning, so that it's not business as usual? If you can do that, again, it doesn't matter if you will call this person a creative person or not, because the output from that person will be innovative and creative output.
Nice. In one of your videos, I see you talking about the culture of the example of the 3 monkeys, and how does it fit to cultural in some organizations. So can you tell a little bit about this story of the 3 monkeys in the?
Yes, I'll say it rather quickly because it does take a few minutes. But for those of you who are not familiar, this is by the way, this is something that some people have told me is not necessarily a true experiment. So I researched it, and if you research the three monkeys experiment with the bananas and the learned helplessness of them, you will get conflicting reports. So there's enough reports that say it's a true story. So again, in the late 60s, 3 monkeys, 3 chimpanzees, kept very hungry, placed in a room. In the room, there's only a ladder, and the bananas are hanging from the ceiling. And when they try to get the bananas, they get punished with a strong stream of cold water. And one by one, the monkeys are taken out. I am making this a little bit shorter. They're taken out and replaced. But what they find is that when the chimpanzees are replaced, they don't need to apply the punishment anymore, because the chimpanzees reinforce self-punishment, because the punishment from the humans was collective. They're very scared of getting this punishment. So they will beat up on any chimpanzee that will try to get the bananas. And if you ask them, why do you do this? They will say, that's just how we work here. Nobody suffered the punishment from the humans. Nobody wants to take the bananas. It really shows us that in some companies there's a culture of status quo. Maintain the status quo, concentrate on your job and doing your job to the best possible way. And often that is with a culture where people, when they raise their head and they say, hey, I have an idea for improvement, instead of being encouraged, their managers usually put their head back down and say, go back to work. We have other people taking care of this.
Yes, and we see several cases over the history on companies that they were creative, they were innovative over many years, like Kodak, that was very innovative, creating cameras and creating shooting experience, and from one time to the other they were surpassed and they were replaced by smartphones. So the fact of the company being innovative, it doesn't mean that they will survive for a long time. They must be always watching the market, watching the trends, to not become overpassed.
So I want to take this question. It's a very good question, and focus it a little bit. When you say the need to be innovative, we need to remember there is different type of innovation. You can be very innovative at what in the 3-box solution is called box 1 level. This means you are innovating your current business. So if my current business is analog photography, paper and chemical-based photography, I can be very innovative. I can have chemicals that work better and faster. I can have paper that costs less and less to produce and gives better results. I can innovate my existing business, and that is great. That will not save me into the future. That will not help me thrive and survive. So you can be very innovative, but in the wrong areas, or innovative only in certain areas while missing the other areas. The crucial other area known as box 3 under the 3-box solution is how to create the businesses for 5 and 10 years from now. And this is exactly where Kodak missed it. Kodak was incredibly innovative. It was innovative to its very last dying day, but it was innovative at the level of its current business. So it made its current business much better. It never looked forward to the future, which was a digital business. And of course, we know mostly the reason they didn't do that is they were afraid of cannibalization, which is one of the biggest arguments when we talk about digitalization and digital transformation, is the fear that the new business you create will eat your old business. And the answer to that is this is totally fine. This is part of the evolution as you innovate your lines of businesses. If you don't do that, somebody else will eat you. So it's better that you are eating yourself. I'm sorry for this crude cannibalistic terms, but the term is cannibalization. It's better that you are the one eating that your new business is eating the old business and getting customers for the old business than a competitor is doing that to you.
Sure, that's correct. And it happens as well in the business case, that the case study that we saw in the course that's for New York Times Digital. It's exactly what happened, isn't it?
Right. New York Times newspapers back in 1997 realized that there was this new trend called the internet. They use what we call weak signals and weak signals predominantly from the market and non-linear shifts that are happening in the market to realize that something big was probably going to happen, and they need the New York Times need an internet presence. So back as far as 23 years ago, they began working on a project to create New York Times online, and this has, of course, proven to be the correct strategy because print media is dying, if not dead, and digital media is the normal. If you didn't plan for this 20 years ago, of course, you can say you can try and make the switch now, but when you have a very competitive environment, you need to start planning for transformation and change that will happen in 5 years. You need to start to plan for that now. You can't plan for it when it happens because that will be too late by that point.
Yeah, that's correct. So do you mean, is that correct to affirm that companies, organizations that promote the culture of innovation, they have more chance to succeed in the future?
Yeah, so I think by coaching innovation, I think what you mean is professionally managing innovation, managing internal innovation. I want to say that from my experience, and I've spoken to quite a few senior managers about innovation and about corporate innovation. What I found is that, and this is slowly changing, what I discovered is that there is still focus on open innovation. So there's still belief that large organizations can buy innovation by simply acquiring startups or creating incubators and bringing startups in, or acquiring knowledge from technology transfer agreements with universities. So my answer to that is yes, of course, open innovation is important. It's one of the two arms of innovation. But my answer always is, if you go to see a piano concerto, you don't want the piano player to play with one arm. Of course, with
open
one
innovation.
arm, yeah, with one arm, yes, you can get music, but if you want to hear the real performance, you need two arms. That second arm that you need is internal innovation. Is innovation to create startups and innovation culture from inside the company, and it's much easier to do open. It's much easier to buy a solution than to develop it. Unfortunately, as you will see if you look at the history of M&As of startups, the post buyout has often ended with the startup founders leaving the company that bought them, taking a lot of experience and knowledge with them because of the cultural clash. Right? So the clash between the startup culture and the large organization culture is often so much that they go from being very free to being under bureaucratic control, and they leave. And so very often large organizations miss on the benefits of the innovative technology because they just try to buy it and they don't understand how to integrate it. Whereas if at the same time they develop it internally, they will get the advantage of avoiding this problem. But also when you develop innovation internally, of course you develop the skills of how to develop innovation internally.
I see.
So it becomes not a one-off effort, it becomes part of the culture. And and you said innovation coaching. The actual answer is yes. Innovation coaching, of course, it's an important part. It's one of the elements that needs to be done in an overall strategic management. We call innovation management. So to really succeed in that, an organization must have a focal point in the company. They must have a leader. They must have a father or a mother, if you like, for the innovation effort. A sponsor, exactly. And that's the actual money might. It doesn't really matter where that money comes from. In some organization, it comes from the top through a budget allocation. In some organizations, they ask the department to sponsor innovation, and the innovation department simply helps. So, for example, innovation in the finance department of a large company that wants to find a way to innovate its financial processes, they will they may be required to provide the funds to sponsor. I will give you an example at MDocs. When I worked at MDocs, and part of my job was internal sales of innovation. That means I had to sell the services that my department, the innovation department, provided. I had to sell them internally to internal department managers. Now, why did I need to sell them? I need to sell them not because we were a profit center. So I did not charge money for my services. People understand what a profit center is. That different departments in the company charge internal funds, cost transfers exactly within the company. So there was our services were free. It was considered so important, there will be no cost transfer. But for the departments that engage in innovation, there was still a cost. And that cost predominantly was made up of two things. There was the cost of time, of doing training for the employees and managers, of taking parts in hackathons, in ideation generation. There was that element of the cost, but the even larger element, and this is what a lot of companies miss, is the cost of prototyping and validating, what we call incubating an idea. So it may cost you $50,000 as an organization to go through an ideation process and come up with good ideas. It will cost you much more. It will cost you easily 10 times more to validate that, incubate that, prototype it, and do some piloting in the market. This is the important cost, and very often companies don't put the money aside into a private venture capital fund. They use the venture capital only for buying other companies, not for investing in internal innovation. And Luis, I have to tell you from experience, this is one of the worst things you can do, because then all of the ideation process, all of the hackathons, all that is done to get to great ideas is wasted because none of those ideas get prototype or get validated. None of those ideas go into incubation, or very few, and that creates a very negative culture of innovation in the company, because people will say, why do we work so hard and take part in all of these events if we are not given the opportunity to implement it? And this is what we call innovation theater, where it's just the acting that innovation is happening.
It's just for the company.
Is really happening.
It's just for the company. For the company, looks like innovative.
And it doesn't work because ultimately people don't fall for that. They see that just because you're doing hackathons and you are asking people for ideas and you are collecting ideas, it doesn't mean. Remember, we said for it to be innovation, you have to implement ideas and turn them into value. If that's not happening, you're just generating creative ideas. This is all you're doing.
Yeah. One question for you is the middle point. So we talk about the creative idea. So this is a starting point, having a bunch of creative ideas so you can pursue some of them. And the other part is the implementation. But in the middle of the two, you have the value. So the idea must generate some value, or for the shareholders or for the customers. So you have to consider if it's real, it's okay, but you must focus if it's worth implementing this idea, isn't it?
Right. So I think yes, you're referring to the famous MIT approach in design thinking, the famous gateways of MIT, which are real, win, worth it. That say that for an idea to be green lighted as innovative, whether it's by a VC that's looking to invest or a management looking to develop as an internal startup, it must have a real need for it. By the way, that need doesn't mean that the need has to come from end users and customers. It could be an idea that the real need is from employees, and you're developing an internal innovation tool, or it's a process. So we shouldn't think just in terms of products and services, and innovation is much more than just products and services, and it's more than just trying to make things better for your customers. But yes, so it's true. You need to have value. I wouldn't say it's the middle. I would say that, for example, with MIT approach, the approach is a real need. It's winnable, meaning that it's technically feasible and it's better than the competition in answering key unmet needs and pain points. And finally, that it's financially viable, and financial viability is tested via doing net present value financial analysis. So yes, there has to be value generated. One of the ways of checking for that value is looking at net present value, and that's very common.
Okay, but then the implementation come later. So once you have the three gateways, real, win, work, then you have the implementation. So when you decide that all the three steps was you have green lights on the three gates, then you go to the implementation. That is the most difficult part, if I understood well.
Right. So, and this is another area where companies unfortunately fail to make the bridge between a green lighted idea and an incubation program to validate iteratively, like Eric Rice writes in the Lean Startup, do iterative validation or invalidation of your assumptions in an iterative secular way, so that you are constantly checking your assumptions with your market, with your stakeholders, and that you are not developing a solution or a prototype for a solution just because you think it's the right thing to do. You're doing it based on real research, primary research that you're constantly doing. You're constantly in touch with your market.
I see. And I do believe that you have seen many times it happens to us, our group, our team in the course, that most of the time the people are passionate about your creative ideas. So they try to manipulate the data to pass all the three gateways because they want to win in that idea.
All right. So one of the things that we tell our students, and it should be something that all people who are planning to launch a startup or investigate a startup, is that if you do the analysis and you are checking to see whether your idea is worth green lighting, even as a group of, whether you're a group of students or you're a group of friends or you're a small team that wants to do a project, there is nothing wrong with saying that it's no go. If you check your gateways and your decision is not to go ahead, this is a very acceptable and absolutely fine to do that. You don't want to move ahead even though the data speaks against you. So if for some reason you find that the need is not strong enough, the market is not large enough, it's not financially viable, for whatever reasons that it's not green lighted. By the way, the green lighting stages, there's first internal green lighting. So as a team, we need to decide whether we believe enough in our idea to want to then pitch it to investors or to management. Or actually, you're not really pitching to management, you're pitching to subject matter experts who are representing the interests of management, even though management likes to often sit in on such pitch events. That's the question you really need to be asking at the end.
Nice. And talking about implementation per se, we have several tools that are known in the market, like time thinking, SIT, and other examples. How can the company understand which one is the better to pursue? It's a matter of having an expert to identify the need, identify the solution that they are looking for, and then apply the correct tool?
So it very much depends on whether the company we're talking about, at what stage it's at in terms of developing culture and systematic innovation. If it hasn't really started doing that in an organized way, if it's doing it in what we call a tactical way, if it's looking at identifying challenges and identifying specific tactical challenges that it needs to solve, then it will be applying design thinking and SIT, and it can apply a whole bunch of methodologies. And it's enough to have a good innovation expert help the company decide which methodologies to apply at what point and for which situation, for which kind of challenges. That is fine, but the best practice approach is to invest in long-term innovation capability as a company, and that means to have an owner for innovation. That owner is usually the innovation VP, reporting to the CTO of the company, or maybe reporting to CHR. Some companies have innovation in the HR because of the L&D and the training, and that's one way. Other people like to have innovation under CTO and the chief scientist for the company, and really, ultimately, so long as it's managed professionally, from my experience, it doesn't really matter. There's advantages and disadvantages of how you place the innovation department in your corporate structure. There's the pros and cons for each approach. The bottom line, though, Luis, is that there must be an owner, there must be a professional. Usually the VP, innovation VP, will not be involved so much in the day-to-day innovation management. They will be more looking at a strategic level and reporting to senior management to show them that there is progress. In fact, I can tell you at Amdocs, one of the problems that we had at the beginning in the innovation department is that the innovation VP, for example, was being replaced every year. So nobody lasted more than 1 year in this role. And the reason that they didn't last in that role, and this is something that happened in a lot of companies, is because of the pressure to show results to senior management.
Short-term results.
Short-term results, and senior management not understanding that ROI is not the only way and is actually not the correct way to measure success of innovation. That you need to look at metrics such as what is the percentage of my employees that are going through innovation training, what is the percentage of ideas that are being generated that are worthwhile ideas that are moving into next stages. It's very easy to say I have 100% more ideas this year, but if they are rubbish ideas, then it's a totally useless matrix. So what is the percentage of interesting ideas? What is the percentage of ideas that get executed and implemented, and out of that implementation actually survive the process? What's the percentage of how many patents are being generated? What's the ESET and CSET in my company? What's the employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction from innovation, specifically from innovation?
Sure.
So there's lots of matrix, and so it becomes very important that you have an innovation VP that can present matrix to the senior management and explain to them that you need to look at you should not be looking at short-term financial matrix, but there should be a whole range of matrix to do, and that goes back to having a professional, dedicated innovation management department that in the beginning can be 1 or 2 people. Doesn't have to be a large department. At MDocs, for example, we had 15 people, which is quite a large department. I mean, it's 26,000 employees, but it covered all aspects of innovation, including incubation. So bottom line, if you want to succeed and not just address specific challenges, you need to have a systematic approach. And that means an innovation manager, innovation department, and well-integrated relationships between the innovation department and other key departments in the organization, including, of course, including R&D, including strategy, marketing, sales, almost every communication. Very important to have the good relationship and work together with the communication department.
Purchasing department, logistics and so ever.
Yes, but strategy, communication, R&D are very important. With the other departments, some departments innovation works in with as a provider. So these are the internal customers. But other departments, innovation department will work with as partner. So communication department is a partner. Marketing department is a partner. So it will, whoever is managing innovation in a large organization will need to be very good at forming alliances, forming political alliances, forming partnerships, creating bridges internally and externally. But I'm talking specifically now about internal innovation. So creating good alliances inside the company, so that, because as an innovation manager, they don't have control over other department managers. They need their cooperation. They need them to work together. So
and they must have empowerment. The empowerment is very important.
Empowerment is important, but I would say what's even more important is the concept of creating a win-win situation. I, as an innovation manager, if I want any other department manager to work with me, I must think of them as a client. Even if they are inside my company, I must think of them as a client. And what we learned in design thinking, I would apply internally to my department head and manager clients. If I was, again, an innovation manager, or as a consultant, consulting to innovation managers, one of the things that I tell them is how important it is to create that alliance with the various departments. For example, one way you can do that, and one thing that we did, is we had a steering committee of representatives from each department that we worked with. So they would always know what the innovation department is doing, and so they can share success across departments. So departments can learn from the innovation activities of each department and use that to improve how they work. And by the way, we also created competition between departments. So in the portal, we would have what is the various innovation scores for different departments so that we can get them to compete and try to be better than the other. And that included awards, you know, the most innovative department, the most innovative employee, and all of that. By the way, all of that is great and it's important, but if it doesn't move from challenge to a strategic challenge to idea to incubation to tool, product or service, then it's a complete waste of time and it's just theater.
Yes, and what I see mostly here in Brazil, that we don't have so many large corporations working in this way that you presented, is that in most of the occasions they understand that the innovation should come from outside to inside. So let's hire a consultant. This guy must be very creative, and they will come here, watch what we are doing, and present a creative idea, and take the hands of the people who work with us. And these people who work for us will implement the idea that this guy come and suggested to us. So this is the completely wrong way to implement innovation management in a corporation, isn't it?
So it's a little bit like the difference in approach for United Nations projects to help in developing communities become more self-reliant. I can ship in food, and I can ship in trucks of food and water, or I can help the local population learn how to make agricultural products better and how to find water in the ground and become self-reliant. So it's okay to bring innovation consultants, especially if they know what they're talking about. It's important to speak to experts, but a company should seek to bring in consultants to help it become self-reliant, at least partially self-reliant, so that it knows how to create these innovation in a systematic way and doesn't need to bring a consultant every time it has a problem or every time it wants to come up with an idea. It needs to develop those skills and capabilities internally, and it should very carefully use the right consultants to create those capabilities, because someone who calls themselves an innovation consultant is very different from someone else who says, I am also an innovation consultant. People specialize. There are people whose specialty is design thinking. There are people whose specialty is the incubation process. There are people whose specialty is working with startups. And there are people who specialize in finding startups. Each of them calls themselves an innovation manager or innovation consultants. They do very different roles. So if you bring innovation consultants in, you need to be very clear about why you're doing that, what you're trying to achieve, and the best, really, if you're a large organization, you don't want to be constantly relying on consultants to generate innovation. So you should bring in the consultants that will help you to create that center of competence and center of excellence by yourself, so that you are self-sufficient.
It's a matter of qualifying people and to modify the culture of the organization to think differently in a constant way, in a long run way.
It's much more than that. I hear what you're saying, but it's actually much more than that. It's not just to think differently. The aspect of innovation management, really, it's an art form. It's multidisciplinary. It requires understanding of business, of training, of technology, but not only of psychology, of corporate sociology. But in the medium to long term, if you want successful innovation, you need to start creating that capability, and that means having an owner, having an innovation VP, and then having people who are actually executing innovation and inside the innovation department. This means working with the L&D team, making sure that there is train the trainer program, so that all the innovation training does not fall on just the one innovation trainer in the organization. Sometimes if it's innovation manager, then they're trying to do all the jobs. They're trying to manage, and they train, and they speak to clients. It's very hard. It's not Well, it depends. I know I'm actually speaking about a situation where there is no one else to manage, where there's only one person doing all the jobs. So this is very wrong approach, especially in large companies, because there are many tasks to do. It's okay to start with one innovation manager or innovation VP, but very quickly an organization should realize that it needs to invest in capabilities. I will just give you one example. At Amdocs, for example, we in our innovation team, we had a dedicated marketing manager. So what does this mean? It means that there was a marketing manager specializing in innovation marketing innovation both internally to the employees, so marketing all the innovation programs and marketing the culture of innovation inside the company, but also marketing externally about innovation achievements of Amdocs to the market and to its customers and to all stakeholders. Now, you ask yourself, why do we need a dedicated marketing manager? Excuse me. You can just go to the marketing department and ask them to do the job. The problem is when you have such a large organization, where you have thousands of employees, you don't want to be reliant on multiple functions coming from internal outsourcing. So there is a major advantage if you have the scale to have your own innovation marketing manager in your innovation team.
I see.
Because that means that you have someone who's 100% dedicated and available. You don't have to, by the way, at Amdocs and at many other organizations, marketing, graphic design, for example, they're all profit centers. So if we ever needed to do presentations and we needed some graphic design done, we would pay. It would be very expensive from an internal budget to hire graphic design services for that exercise. And so if you get large enough, you'll think maybe we should have our own graphic designer. Sure. It becomes like a small business inside the company.
Yes, correct. We have just 5 minutes here left. So my last question is the last part of our title. So we talk about thrive and survive. So talking about survival, several companies, mainly due to the pandemic issues, the pandemic crisis around the world, they were forced to adapt their business to survive in the market. So which recommendations do you have for those organizations that are looking for innovating their business?
It's going to sound strange to you, but my recommendations is not to lose track of fundamentals. So yes, there is a crisis, there is a challenge, but at the end, the approach needs to be very methodical. And first of all, the company should always be able to identify should always try to identify what challenges it is facing, both in the short term and in the long term. But the fundamentals, Luis, remain the same. You have customers. Those customers have needs. Now, there is a crisis on. That crisis affects those needs. It changes those needs. So the needs, for example, even very simple and banal example, Domino's Pizza. I think it was Domino's Pizza. They are now saying that when you are ordering pizza from Domino's, it goes from the oven to your house without a human hand touching it. No one touches the physical. They will touch the box, of course, but no one touches the actual pizza. So Domino's understood that people have a fear of COVID infection from food and from people infecting their food. So they changed their production method, and they changed the marketing collateral and information to explain that to their customers. So they didn't start creating a new innovative pizza. They're not putting the vaccine into the pizza. I mean, that could be interesting. I think people would prefer to have a vaccine from a pizza than from a needle in their arm. But the fundamental remained the same, right? The fundamental is, what is hurting my customer? how can I make my customers' life better? And not because I think so, but because I speak to customers, because I listen, I've learned how to interview them. Interviewing is a skill that you need to learn. The consultancy I run teaches interviewing skills, for example, because very often design thinking projects send people out to do interviews, but they don't teach them how to make the interview. So they come back with very shallow and not very interesting or informative information about the customers. But you must know what the customers need. You must know what's hurting them, even if they don't know it themselves. And then you can create solutions for any challenge.
So we have just few seconds left. So I would like to thank you very much for joining us, for all the knowledge, all the expertise that you share with the people here. It's very, very, very interesting. So I thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me, Luis. It's been a real pleasure to listen to your questions and have this discussion with you. Well, thank you so much. Have a good evening.
For you too.
Speak soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.